Israel is committing the Holocaust of our time, and they are doing it in full view of a seemingly indifferent world. Their genocidal campaign in what little remains of Palestine is the culmination of decades of capitalist colonial ambitions that have been grooming us all and incrementally pushing the boundaries of our acquiescence since traditional European colonial powers were forced to retreat from their colonies. And since the United States was unceremoniously ousted from Vietnam by lightly armed guerrilla forces. Despite the romantic narrative surrounding the establishment of Israel, complete with an aura of a happy ending to Europe's genocide of their own Jewish citizenry, the reality is that Israel was created as a Western colonial outpost in a resource-rich region. It was Europe's last hurrah as a colonial powerhouse, which the U.S. adopted in earnest, particularly in the wake of the 1967 war. The greatest impediment to empire is, and historically has always been, the conscience and consent of masses. After decades of imperial wars, environmental destruction, the gutting of public services and public institutions, and the fleecing of workers, empire is at last having to contend with mass discontent on this occasion of genocide. At some point, the boundaries are pushed too far. There was a hint of this in the student movements of the 1960s and 1970s that spurred and end America's slaughter in Vietnam and Cambodia. The moral force of Black people rising together in their pain and rage against legislated racism changed the social fabric of America, ending formal segregation and ushering a new era in the struggle against institutional racialism. Power did what power does, deploying brute force, murder, intimidation, silencing, marginalizing, surveillance, and all manner of corrupt policing. We see the outcome, and we think we know it. Labels like victory and advancement are applied. Civil rights is a term spoken as an absolute, a singular point of history, with a terrible before and liberated after. It's that happy ending, reframing of what is indeed a boundless thread of struggle in both directions through time. Consent and narrative construction. The resilience of elite capitalist rule relies heavily on this kind of narrative construction that manipulates public imagination with platitudes and reversible concessions, followed by a rebranding of oppression. Enslavement becomes mass incarceration and purposeful drug addiction. Segregation is sacrificed to be replaced with conscription of Black faces around the same table of power ethos. Power adapted since the 1960s, creating new stops, levers, gates, and gatekeepers. They lulled us back into their system, rebooted it with greater cruelty and corruption, and retooled it with distractions and celebrity worship, while they consolidated and concentrated power in the hands of a tiny minority. They bought politicians, who in turn worked to safeguard and increase the wealth and influence of this elite minority through various tax loopholes, deregulations, and privatization of public institutions, and all manner of legislations that turned millionaires into billionaires and soon trillionaires, a staggering wealth gap built on the misery of the masses. They created laws to exonerate their criminality and laws to criminalize our dissent. They busted up the unions, subjugated workers, and pitted them against each other. Instead of confronting the bosses, workers were manipulated into demanding iron borders and separation of families at those borders. They scraped environmental regulations and wildlife protections to continue extraction while polluting the planet. The deregulations allowed this tiny minority to buy up the airwaves. So now they dictate the content of 95% of everything we see, hear, and read in the way of mainstream journalism, entertainment, education, and cultural productions. It is by no accident that terrorist characters dominate Arab depictions in Hollywood. The unusually high number of casual mentions of Israeli benevolence or Israeli genius in so many television series and films is intentional. And it through such management of public sentiment over decades that Palestinian humanity is shamefully trivialized or ignored in both print and broadcast news media, no matter how many atrocities we face at Israel's hands. This is the reason why people can watch the wholesale vandalizing of our lives without flinching. Whether it's Palestine, Iraq, Libya, Sudan, Syria, Somalia, Lebanon. If what's happening to Palestinians were happening to Israelis, well, we all know there would have been zero tolerance for a single bomb. Instead of paying taxes, This elite ruling class, these billionaires, donate to universities sufficient sums to impose their vision not only for higher education, but also for the acceptable expression of constitutional rights like the First Amendment. For example, outraged by a Palestinian literature festival, a beautiful celebration of Palestinian excellence and indigenous heritage, the billionaires Mark Rowan, Dick Wolf, and the Lauder family conspired to remove the president of the University of Pennsylvania because she was insufficiently deferential to their interpretation of academic freedom. Mass surveillance of the populace followed the gutting and looting of public education in the United States. The rich got richer, and the poor became destitute. In the name of technology and efficiency, capitalists degraded our food and water, poisoned them even, benefiting pharmaceutical billionaires who keep the masses teetering on the edge of health. Popular gurus pushed philosophies of individualism, contempt for family, and various forms of alienation that shattered community and social or familial bonds, leaving vast swaths of the people unable to cope with life without drug varieties, both legal and illegal. They have weighed us down with the fake dreams they scripted for us, insurmountable debt as a stand-in for education, a white picket fence and endless consumption as a stand-in for family, blood diamonds as a stand-in for love, and carnage abroad as a stand-in for greatness. They sold us a glorious pile of shit and made us think it was all there is, that such an unnatural and parasitic way of life was the normal, even inevitable. They glorified obsessive consumerism and obscenely ostentatious lifestyles, and we let them, believing it was our choice. But we had none. Choice, like democracy and free press, is an American illusion, a fairy tale they peddle in school, newspapers, and songs. Look how quickly they disbanded, silenced, and erased memory of the Occupy Wall Street movement in 2011. Look how we are taught to believe that change can only come through the ballot box, where we're told to choose between two war criminals one election after another. This moment of live-streamed genocide is the culmination of decades of global capitalist criminality and genocidal Western and Zionist imperialism. We watch in horror and perceived impotence. Thank God for the students, but thank God for Palestinian resistance. Thank God for every Palestinian journalist and every Palestinian healthcare worker risking their lives day in and out to serve their people. For every fighter choosing martyrdom over indignity. For the local organizations and activists you never hear about, but whose work has been keeping thousands alive. For the students everywhere, Naledi Pandor in South Africa, Francesca Albanese at the United Nations, and Claire Daly in the European Parliament. For the masses rising up in Blockout 2024. For artists and musicians from Roger Waters and Talib Kweli to Macklemore and Black Thought, Questlove, and more. For Yemen, South Africa, and Colombia, and Ireland and Spain. For the Hague Group and every courageous country standing on principle. For every person who refuses to remain silent. Gaza is all the world now. This time is different from the uprisings of the 1960s and 1970s. There is a new sense of global interconnection, an emerging class consciousness, and foundational political analyses predicated on post-colonial studies and intersectionality, none of which were present decades ago. Back then, the white students protesting the war wouldn't unite with the Black Panthers because they were too racist to connect the dots. All dots are connecting now. Gaza is no longer the enclave sealed and besieged by Israel and Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's Egypt into a concentration camp. Gaza is no longer the densely populated strip of Israeli-occupied land. Rather, Gaza is now all the world. Gaza is our collective moment of truth, the meaning in our lives. It is the clarity we need and seek. It is the definitive divide between us and the ruling class that tramples us. It is us or them. There is no middle place now. All the borders fade, leaving us united to confront this greedy, genocidal minority everywhere. Gaza is the most anguished place on earth at this hour, dimmed by unimaginable Zionist cruelty, set to music for TikTok. And from this tortured place of rubble, death, and misery, there springs the greatest light we have ever known to guide us out of the darkness in which we've been forced to live. The light of our ancestors, from Palestine and Al-Kebulin to Turtle Island and Aotearoa. If we allow the wheels of this genocidal Zionist engine to keep turning, there will be no more limits to fascism. There will be no shame or red lines before which they will halt. There will be no boundaries against which they'll need to push. Saving Gaza is our gateway to save humanity from this insatiable group of humans devouring the planet and its life force. This struggle can no more be just about a ceasefire. It must demand liberation and accountability across our burning planet.